Hey guys, and welcome back. What we're going to do now is look at bringing in maybe some lens flares and just adding to the composition that we've already built up here. I think we're in pretty good shape to move on. So what we're going to do is go ahead and open up your web browser and go to MediaMilitia.com. Now, if you aren't familiar with Media Militia, they've already got tons of subscribers and some really cool freebies. But the one that we're concerned with right now is the lens flares. So if you click on that, you'll come over to this page where these guys were awesome enough to have put together this free resource for you that contains 50 free high-res lens flares. So these are, JPEGs, PNGs, and it's a pretty big file. So I went ahead and downloaded it ahead of time, but I really would recommend going ahead and doing that. So once you have those, I've kind of gone through and pre-selected a few that I think are going to work well with our image. So you see I've got 2, 3, 29, 31, 40, and 42. And I mean, there's a ton of these. There's over, 100 things in here, but 50 different ones, but then you get two versions of each. The reason we want to use the PNGs are just to have the transparency. So I'm going to open these up in Photoshop and just show you guys a few of them. I didn't want to, be downloading these while recording the video because that would just be kind of boring, and I didn't want to put you guys to sleep. So go ahead and do that. But once you've done it, you'll have something like this. All right. So it's not going to look like much because you'll mostly be seeing the transparent background. But I'm just going to pull some of these panels aside here. I guess it only opened one. So let's try it. Bring in number 29, the PNG file. And when you bring it into your document, it should automatically just place it on top, which it did. Okay, so go back over to Photoshop and just rename this layer Lens Flare 1. Okay, so you can see here, just by having the PNG, everything shows through pretty nicely. But it's a nice way that we can start to build up some light effects. So the first thing I want to do is change it to screen. Just to make sure that there's no, black or dark shades really showing through here. And, you may decide to only keep part of this image, but we can always, mask it out and, rotate it and just play around with the placement of the flare within the design that we've built up so far. All right, the other thing that we're going to do is just quickly change the color of it so that it blends better with what we've got going on here. So that we can maintain that, orangey yellow kind of color scheme. So in order to do that, we're just going to follow the same method I used earlier when showing you guys how to add adjustment layers with clipping masks, and that is to hold down the Alt Option key, and we're going to go to Hue Saturation this time. Use Previous Layer to create clipping mask, and hit OK. All right, so now you'll see, just move that over a little bit. Now you'll see that we can, move the hue slider around, and the lens flare will start to change from, blue to green to red. And you can just kind of go through the whole gamut here and take a look, see for yourself how easy it is to just modify the color. And, you can boost the saturation up as well. But for the most part, it's pretty easy to add these lens flares to our composition, and again, it's just such a great resource from our friends at Media Militia. All right, so I don't particularly like this lens flare for this design, but again, it's just a matter of kind of experimenting and seeing which ones you think might work. So let's try 2 or 3 and see what those look like. All right, so once these open up, we're just going to do the same thing, just try it, change the blending mode to screen, and, maybe modify the color a little bit to see, what will work best within our composition. All right, so number 3, just drag it over to Photoshop. Go ahead and hit Command plus W to close the window there, F to get back to our full screen. And you'll see this one's a little more complex. But there may be some pieces here that we can use. So change the blending mode and go ahead and add another hue saturation adjustment layer with a clipping mask. All right, we're just going to do the same thing here. modify the hue slider to see what it looks like when we move things around. It's actually kind of muddy, I think, when we change the colors a little too much. So here's what we can do instead. All right, rather than changing that, I'm just going to scrap it. I really like this kind of like rainbow flare that happens in here. I think that could look really nice, off to the side, maybe like that. So what I'm going to do is just add a layer mask to it. Okay, but this time, instead of brushing out everything else, I'm going to go up to Image, Adjustments, Invert. Okay, so you'll see we just got rid of everything basically. But now we're going to use a white brush to bring back in some of the lens flare. Right, so this will just, it's the opposite of what we were doing before with our layer mask. For other than brushing out what we don't want, we're now brushing in what we want to keep. All right, and you can see I kind of, had a mental picture in my mind of where that particular segment of the lens flare was that I wanted to reuse. All right, so now we just have this, rainbow part by itself, which is subtle, but I think when combined with other, layers and other lens effects, it is actually going to look pretty good. All right, so we'll call this layer lens flare 1. Go ahead and close that. And I believe that was number 3. So let's go ahead and try one of these other ones. We've tried 3, 29. Now let's take a look at 40 and see what we can do with it. All right, so I just want to get a quick preview here. You can do this by just hitting the space bar. Actually, it'll open up a preview for you. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and open up 42.png. Do the same thing we did before, just bring it over into our Photoshop document. And this one is really bright and blown out, so I think we're looking for something more along the lines of this to work within our composition. And you can see here that you still have some of this rainbow type of effect over here. But if you go ahead and just change the blending mode to screen, like we did before, you'll get the same result where it just shows through pretty much everything below it. But this part is pretty cool actually, where you get the brightest part of the flare, and you can kind of just figure out where you want that to go. As you guys can tell from the image of the phone, the brightest highlight seems to be coming from the upper left kind of area there. So we want to maybe try to localize the lens flare to that part of the image, so it just is more consistent with the light and the direction of the light and everything like that. So I think something like that actually looks pretty cool. So I'm going to go ahead and call this one lens flare 2. And let's just see what happens, just for the hell of it, when we change the color. All right, it might look kind of muddy like we did on the other one, but you never know until you try. There might be some little hints there, like this line right in here. When that gets orange, it actually looks pretty good. So I think something around there. All right. So now on your lens flare 2 layer, go ahead and add a layer mask. And this time we're not going to invert it. We're just going to brush out the areas we want to get rid of. All right, so I'm going to start to mask out these hard edges around the side here, which you won't notice right away because I'm still using kind of a low opacity brush. But after you make a couple passes over it, you'll see it starting to gradually fade. So, which is nice because you don't want a really abrupt, cut, or you don't want an abrupt fade on the lens flare. So this allows you to just kind of gradually, knock it out. All right, but you can see here, it's starting to look pretty good. All right, we're going to go ahead and do the same thing along the top edge over here. Where that flare starts to get pretty hot. All right, I'm just going to dial it down a little bit. All right, fade it. So now all we are basically left with is this nice strong highlight going, at a diagonal through the image. And again, feel free to rotate it, transform it, and see how it looks, just like we did with our other shapes. You may decide that you don't like this one, in which case you can, feel free to try one of the other 50 lens flares that are available and, just see which ones work best. I'm just going off of, what I thought would look best. So, you guys may or may not agree. So feel free to experiment with that a little bit. But, I really enjoy adding these kind of effects and things like that to the images, and I think it really gives it a nice kind of polish. All right, so I'm going to zoom out and just kind of play around with it a little bit. See what works, what doesn't work. Maybe you want it coming in from a different angle or, different side here. And just by rotating it, I noticed that I've missed a little area over here that I wanted to mask out. So sometimes just by moving things around and playing with the transform tool, you can see some areas that you may have missed. But it's important to, go over it and make sure that everything looks right. All right, so that was taking a little too long. I'm just going to go ahead and, instead of doing that, just flip it horizontally and pretty much get the same thing. All right, but I think you guys get the idea. You can see how how this works, and how using the blending modes in combination with PNG files can really lead to some pretty cool results. So it's not quite as difficult as you may have thought before. It's just about getting it to look right. That's really the biggest challenge when working with these type of flares. All right, so all I'm doing is kind of going over the other areas with my brush to mask it out. All right, because we don't need all of the extra stuff. All right, we just want the parts that we want to keep. That's all that we're concerned about right now. Let's see. Missed a spot up here. Just going around the border of it, really. So, you guys can go at your own pace. I'm just trying to move through that fairly quickly. And, you may decide you don't want it to come over the upper left. Maybe it just doesn't look good, even if it's not 100%, consistent with everything else. So let's just see what happens when we brush out a little more of it. So it just appears to be a smaller, more localized type of a lens flare. Right? And you can always increase or decrease the size of your brush to get a little more fine and more detailed in there, a little more accurate. But I think using a soft brush at a low opacity is the way to get it to really fade gradually like that. All right, so there's something around here. Feels pretty nice, I think. Let's go with that. All right, and then lens flare 1, you'll remember is just behind it, and that's that little kind of rainbow colored piece here. And I don't know if we want that to be in the exact same spot as our main flare. So we can move that around to a different area, and see where that can fit. All right, so maybe it's over here, maybe it's over here a little bit. It's entirely up to you. I think something like that looks pretty good. So okay, at this point I'm going to go ahead and tidy up this mask just a little bit more, just to make sure I've got everything. All right, tighten it up. Okay, and just to show you guys really quickly, linear dodge is also a pretty good mode that works very similarly to screen. Also, color dodge is pretty good. But I think for now, I'm actually going to go with linear dodge. All right, and I'm going to select these 3 layers and put them into a group folder and just call it lens flares. All right, very straightforward. So what I want to do now is return to my hue saturation adjustment layer and just play around with the settings a little bit more to see if maybe making it orange will help, because we don't really have any purple tones anywhere else in the image, so it was just feeling a little bit out of place to me. All right, so you'll notice what I did is I just checked off that colorize box. So that's going to, restrict the color palette to, one specific range rather than, multiple ranges. So if it's red, it's going to be all red. If it's, blue, it'll be all blue. But I think here we just want a little bit of an orange tone to it, and you can boost the saturation up as well. I think something in here feels pretty good. You notice if I uncheck it, you get that purple tint, which we don't want. So I think colorize is a pretty good option here. All right, go ahead and hit OK. And let's see. I'm just going to finesse the placement a little bit more. Let's see, as we move this around, you might notice a few other areas that look like they could be touched up. So, it's not out of the ordinary to have to spend a little bit of extra time on this type of step because it really, it does draw your attention and it really pulls your eye into the corner of the image there. So you want to give it a little more attention. All right, something like that. Okay, so go ahead, and what I want to try now is to go to our cell phone layer and create a new layer. Then I'm going to hit Command and my left bracket to move that layer below the cell phone and zoom in, and let's select our brush tool. All right, switch over to the brush. Low opacity brush is fine. And what I want to do is select solid black. So go ahead and hit D to get your default colors on the keyboard there. And I'm just going to start to brush in a little black here because I want to see how it would look if it, if we gave the illusion that our cell phone was actually casting a shadow onto some of these bubbles, especially with this strong light up top. I think that this, might help to make it pop a little more. All right, so I'm going to go, a little more extreme than I need to, and just kind of dial it back. But you'll see it'll help to add some depth, I think. All right, so I'm going to put it at about 80%, and then let's go ahead and add a layer mask to it, and just start to remove some of the shadow too. So we're just subtracting from the shadow that we've just added, right? And when you zoom out, you can see how that shadow helps to add a little bit more depth to the phone. All right, and feel free to play with the opacity a little more. Maybe it's 70% or 75%, or you may like it a little bit higher than that. But I think somewhere around the 75 range looks pretty good. All right, so I'm just going to call this layer shadow, and I will go ahead and place it in my cell phone layer, my cell phone folder rather, just below the smart object. So now the whole cell phone is all in there together. Okay, so you can see in just a few simple steps how much we've really added to our image. And there's a few more things that I want to do to this, and to really build it out and just help get it there. So I hope you guys have been following along, and hopefully this makes sense. And we just have a few more steps to run through, and then I think we're there.